Were reports wrong about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson after all? Is Philly in jeopardy of losing one of their breakout defensive stars? And the Dallas Cowboys admit they even prefer Jalen Hurts over Dak Prescott. Plus, $500 million? Could Jalen Hurts get a deal worth more than Patrick Mahomes? And the old adage is, never draft a running back in the first round, but why the Birds just might do it. But first, let's run it. Josh Davis here on a Thursday, and so many exciting possibilities and rumors this time of year. Speaking of which, you all probably saw the report a couple days ago about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson being franchise tagged if the Eagles aren't able to come to terms on a long-term deal. But according to a new report, that doesn't seem likely anymore. Here's what I mean by that. Look at this article by SI.com's Ed Cracks. In it, he says, using a franchise tag on Chauncey Gardner-Johnson isn't the Eagles' way. He goes on to explain how Howie Roseman uses the franchise tag, and he says, the franchise tag has been a foreign concept for Eagles GM Howie Roseman. The last time it was used was in 2012 on wide receiver Deshaun Jackson. The Eagles as an organization have used it just 5 times since its implementation. In addition to applying the tag on Jackson, the other times it was used were on linebacker Jeremiah Trotter, 2002, defensive tackle Corey Simon, 2005, tight end LJ Smith, 2008, and Michael Vick, 2011. In the cases of Trotter and Simon, they ended up rescinding it. So what to make of Monday's news from NFL insider Adam Kaplan that Roseman will put the franchise tag on safety Chauncey Gardner-Johnson if they can't sign him? There's no doubt the Eagles would like to keep Gardner-Johnson, and why wouldn't they? Gardner-Johnson is just 25. He's coming off a season in which he intercepted 6 passes in 12 games, tying for the NFL lead. Had he played all 17, he probably would have led the league. He's one of the top playmakers on the Eagles defense, along with pass rusher Hassan Reddick, who has 2 years left on a 3-year deal he signed last season. The top 5 highest paid safeties for 2023 are, and he goes on to explain, 19 million, 18.2, 17.5, 16. But are any of the names there better than Gardner-Johnson, who is younger than any of the top 5? Certainly, CJGJ belongs in that tier, and the franchise tag, that would be 14.46 million, doesn't put him there. The article goes on to say that Roseman knows the rancor tagging a player can cause. The GM knows the rift it can cause between a relationship between a player and the organization. It's not a sound business practice, but a last-ditch effort to keep a player in the building. The article goes on to quote Gardner-Johnson later saying, I think they made a collective effort to bring me here, and I think they understand who I am. And taking a risk on me, said Gardner-Johnson. Everybody thinks it's a risk, but I think it's a reward when you get me, because I'm a player. I'm a player first before anything, end quote. So perhaps Roseman will stray from the business model of doing contracts rather than applying a franchise tag due to the large number of free agents he has on his hands into the offseason, and tag Gardner-Johnson while continuing to hammer out a deal. Yeah, so I'll admit, whenever I first heard the news, the franchise tag coming out, I was like, awesome, okay, love CJ Gardner-Johnson. We need to do everything we can to keep him. We've got to figure out a way to do that. But after taking a look at the article here, I have to agree. I don't think Howie will employ the tag, but hold on. I don't think that that's a cause for concern. We're going to still have CJGJ. I do believe that Howie's always looking long-term, and he'll be determined to get a contract signed. But Gardner-Johnson embodies the Philly mentality on defense, and Nick Sirianni has said multiple times he loves CJ's passion, he loves his competitiveness, and CJ delivered some of the most brutal hits in the Super Bowl. Despite the very lackluster effort from the defense, CJ was a lone bright spot. So I think he's someone that Howie hit a home run on by acquiring last season. I think a lot of people would agree. You guys would probably agree. And this is one of those players you have to capitalize on. Yes, it's going to cost the Birds, and we're going to have to figure out a way to structure the contract to free up some more cap space, however that looks. But whether it's backloaded contract, adding on bonuses, incentives, that part I leave with Howie and his team of magicians. But they'll figure out a way to do it. The period for teams to use the franchise tag runs until March 7th. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see maybe a report that Gardner-Johnson was tagged, but then it ultimately gets rescinded once a deal is done. Plus, like the article mentioned, Howie understands locker room culture is just as important, if not more important, than the team saving a couple bucks in the long run. What do you guys think? Should Howie lock up CJ long term or just go with the tag? Okay, just 5 days away from the NFL Combine. Why is that so important? Because reports have been circulating that Howie Roseman would have a deal done with Jalen before the Combine, and now the clock is certainly ticking. But one team that wishes they were in our spot, or this predicament, is the Dallas Cowboys. Check out this article on NJ.com by Bridget Hyland, where she says, even in Dallas, they prefer Eagles' Jalen Hurts over Cowboys' Dak Prescott. So take a look at this. She's getting a quote from Kevin Sherrington of the Dallas Morning News, where he's comparing the two quarterbacks. He says, quote, Hurts is 5 years younger, and he's already won as many playoff games in 2 seasons as Dak has won in 7. But you also have to wonder if his body can hold up if he keeps running so much, and what another year of film means for opposing defenses. My bet, at the moment, I'd rather have Hurts because he's younger, stronger, and just as much his team's heartbeat. But before committing long-term, I want to see where these two NFC East quarterbacks are at this time next year, end quote. The article goes on to discuss Jalen and his contract. So Fox Sports' Ralph Vasciano reported that Hurts could end up getting $50 million per year. In it, he said, quote, the Eagles, according to NFL sources, aren't balking at the price tag either. Vasciano reported that Hurts is expected to seek to be one of the 2 or 3 highest paid players based on average annual value in the game. But multiple NFL agents suggest a more likely slot for Hurts is third on the list ahead of Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray, who will make an average of $46.1 million per year on the 5-year, $230.5 million extension he signed last summer. None of the agents thought Hurts would end up with less than the deal Murray got, end quote. It's always fun to live in Dallas and hear the local stations admit Philly is in a terrific spot after doubting Hurts a season ago. And the article went on to mention that, the clock is ticking and really nothing like waiting until the 11th hour to get a deal done. And as the days go by without an official announcement, it does beg the question, is Jalen really waiting for $50 million per year or more? We all know that, Patrick Mahomes, the deal first came out $450 million for 10 years, and that seemed like an absurd amount of money. But that was the going rate then. The increased revenue, salary cap, more recent deals may mean Jalen could get $500 million. Plus, let's not forget that often contract negotiations come down to who blinks first. You don't think Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Tua, others aren't watching thinking, hey, let's see how we can leverage these deals? So if Jalen wanted to maximize his money, he could wait for Lamar's deal to get done and see where that lands him. Ultimately, he has the leverage, especially with Howie already saying he hopes to get the deal done before the NFL Combine. And not to mention what A.J. Brown said on the matter.
You do not pay this man. Just ship me off wherever he finna go.
It's over with.
I'm telling you.
Package deal me with him.
Listen, so you talk about pressure? Howie, get it done.
The more I read into this and listen to the shows from around the country, I don't think it's a question of if Jalen gets an offer of $50 million per year. It's more of a question about how long of a contract are we talking about. I love Jalen. I think he's for real. Don't get me wrong. Nothing bad to say. I think he's for real, but I'm saying anything longer than 6 years really starts to scare me. Yeah, he made enormous strides. He had great production, played his best football on the biggest stage, but how much is that worth? Let me know what you guys think. If let's say the rate was already set at $50 million per year, you had to pay that, how many years would you offer Jalen? All right, next story. The defensive coordinator opening continues to dominate headlines, and at this point, can we just make a decision already? At least one decision's already been made. Jim Leonhard will not be the defensive coordinator for the Eagles after ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reported yesterday. The Eagles and Jim Leonhard mutually decided they would not move forward with his defensive coordinator candidacy per league sources. Worst news I've heard so far regarding the DC position. I've obviously been very high on Leonhard, but that door is now officially closed. The interview carousel continues, though, as the Birds have decided to interview Georgia co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach Glenn Schumann. Schumann coached Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, as well as developing Roquan Smith, to name a few of the impacts that he's had. Schumann's also learned under the great Alabama head coach Nick Saban, Georgia Bulldogs head coach Kirby Smart. So I'd say he's certainly a winner. He's certainly got a winner's pedigree, but at 32 years old, there's some question marks. He definitely could relate to players, but he doesn't have NFL experience, and we'll see. But I've said it time and time before, the Eagles are going to be fine. We've got to trust Howie. We got to trust Nick. They're going to be fine. Really quickly, last story of the day, ESPN released their first-round prospect grades and player comps for every position. I know everyone's always saying drafting a running back in the first round is foolish, but I honestly can't help looking at who's listed number one in that category. Take a look at what Matt Miller says. So in the article here, he's ranking all the positions like I mentioned. Running back Bijan Robinson from Texas is ranked number 5 overall prospect, and the comp is Saquon Barkley. In it, he says, Robinson is the total package as a running back prospect. He plays with amazing patience, but can also lower his shoulder with a 220-pound frame and create space for himself. Robinson's contact balance and vision in traffic are some of the best I've ever seen. He rushed for 1,580 rushing yards and 18 TDs this season. And he's also a very good receiving threat out of the backfield, 314 receiving yards. There are a few players more talented than Robinson in this year's class, end quote. I know there's other holes to fill, especially with free agents that Philly will be losing and other contracts to restructure, but gosh, it's hard not to dream about what a powerhouse this team would be. With Jalen, AJ, Devontae, the O-line, and then add Bijan. He's the 5th-ranked prospect in the NFL draft, but because of the caution of drafting running backs in the first round, the general consensus is that Bijan will go somewhere around 20 to 25. I keep hearing from various scouting reports that this draft is deep with cornerback talent, so Howie could possibly trade back in order to get Bijan, maybe closer to around 20, and then still get his corners later. That's a possibility, maybe, but it's probably not likely, especially with the latest input from Miles Sanders via his Instagram channel. Check it out. So this was in Miles Sanders' Instagram story, but he says, quote, I love Philly. Just bring me back. I hope they bring me back. When asked if he had a message to Howie Roseman, the organization, he said, I love you. I hope you love me too, end quote. If Sanders is willing to sign for the right price, then I'd be okay with that. But he's not someone that I say we can't live without. We'll see which direction Howie decides to go in, or if he might even consider Saquon Barkley. More details on that in a future show from my interview with Thomas Mott of The Thomas Mott Show. But be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest Eagles happenings. That's it for now. Until next time, I'm Josh Davis, and this has been The Philly Special.